At this point, it was time to make the power connections. Holley recommends that you connect the ECM power straight to the battery. And this way, you're guaranteed that the ECM has full juice all the time. The Terminator's ECM needs to know the speed of the engine, so you have to send it an RPM signal, which you can take right from your distributor if it has a tachometer output, or you can connect a wire right to the ignition coil, the same way you'd connect an old-style tach, and then it knows when to spray the fuel. We're also having our Terminator control the electric fan in the car. It's a nice feature. You can set the preset on and off temperatures, and then you don't have to have a separate controller, and your fan will be controlled by the ECM. Next connections we had to make were a couple of the sensors on the engine. We had to install the coolant temperature sensor into the intake manifold and plug that in. And underneath the car, we needed to install the oxygen sensor. You want to pay attention when installing your oxygen sensor. You want to make sure it kind of points downward so that it doesn't fill up with condensation. Exhaust pipes do collect moisture when the car is not warmed up yet. And by pointing it downward, you'll prolong the life of that sensor. Okay, so we're almost finished. Our last step was to install the handheld programmer, which just plugs into the Terminator's port on the back of the ECM. And you can have this in the car. You don't need it all the time, but you do need it when you first start the car up. It asks you a bunch of questions about the car. It asks you the size of the engine, what kind of camshaft you're going to have, where it's going to get that RPM signal if it comes from the coil or from the distributor, and a few other basics. And then you're ready to light this thing off. And when we first turned the key, we had a no start situation, and it was because the battery voltage had dropped while we were doing this process. We had the dome light on in the interior and that kind of stuff. So make sure that you got a fully charged battery. Once we put a battery charger on ours, it lit right off. There's a basic adjustment you're going to need to do with the idle. There's a screw on the side of the throttle body that allows you to open or close the throttle blades, very similar to setting an idle on a carburetor. And the idle air control motor will take it over from there. It took us just a couple of minutes to get ours idling happily right around 800 RPM. One of the coolest features of a properly working EFI system is its cold start ability, right? So we finished the install and the car sat overnight, and to prove I'm not lying, you can take a look at the temp gun here. This is showing room temperature, 82 degrees, nothing's hot there, headers and everything 78 degrees. So this is a cold start situation, you know, ambient. It's still not below zero, but cold enough to demonstrate. Trevor, go ahead and hit the key and we'll see how it starts up. What you'll notice is that we didn't have to crank it and pump fuel into it. We didn't have to pump the gas pedal or do anything. This thing actually retains its fuel pressure because of a check valve in line. Starts like a brand new 2013 car. And now we can select gauges and we can see what's going on here. RPM and the air-fuel ratio at this point. You can see that the air-fuel ratio is kind of bouncing around. This is idle. This will start learning and tuning itself once the car reaches operating temperature. It's got some targets programmed in it, but nothing has been learned yet because we haven't even warmed the car up. The coolant temperature sensor shows 104, so the car's still cold. Battery voltage 13.1 at idle. So the first thing we need to do is get this car warmed up so it starts learning. One thing that's nice about this tank's fuel injection fuel tank is that it fits correctly. I mean, sometimes you got a monkey with getting the nozzle in when you go to fill the car up, but this thing fits exactly the same way as the stock tank did. You'd never know it was there. Filling it kind of sucks, but that's a different story. This screen shows our target air-fuel ratios, 13.5 to 1 at idle, 14.0 at cruise, and wide open throttle at 12.5. I think the cruise could be leaned out to about 14.5 or 14.6, but we're just getting started with this, so we're going to leave it there to make sure everything stays safe. It only took a few miles for the cruising air-fuel ratio to land right on that 14 to 1 target. So our cruise target is 14.0, and going down the road, it's hitting it right away. I mean, it didn't take long to learn that at all. We've got just a few miles on the car, and it's already hitting its target. So it truly does learn as you drive. The more you drive, the more it refines that tune. And the throttle response is much faster than the carburetor was. The mid-range, I can tell already it's got more torque as it pulls through the mid-range. And the wide open, it gives it just the amount of fuel that it needs to go fast. At this point, we thought it would be neat to tell the world that we had a fuel injection setup on this car, so we added a couple visual elements to complete the package. We're using a set of these Corvette scripted valve covers from PML Fabrication. Their website is yourcovers.com, and these guys have been making custom valve covers for years. And what's custom about these is they look like a stock fuel injection Corvette script valve cover. But those covers are kind of hard to adapt to a later small block Chevy because they don't have any holes for breathers or for the oil fill. What PML did is they bored a hole in the top of the cover here, and they also added some reinforcement on the inside. So there's a little baffle there so your oil doesn't just go draining out the top of that. They're polished cast aluminum. They come in different finishes. If you want them natural or not polished, you can get that too. And the other cool thing is that these are made in the United States. These valve covers come with grommets for the PCV valve and the breather, and they are different sizes. You want to make sure you put the right size in the right place so that your PCV valve will pop right back in. To perpetuate the illusion that this was a factory-built 1965 fuel-injected Chevelle, we obtained a set of factory-style 1965 Corvette fuel injection badges and mounted them on the fenders of the car. These reproduction badges were designed for the Corvette, which mounted with the attached studs. Our Chevelle does not have holes in the fender, so we cut the studs off and spent a few minutes to trim some 3M double-sided tape on the back side of the badge. Then we measured both sides of the fenders to make sure we would stick these in the same place on each side. We like the fact that the badges and the valve covers are all what came on a factory 1965 fuel-injected car, just not a Chevelle. So after having driven this car for probably a couple hundred miles since we finished the install, I am definitely able to recommend this type of modification. The car starts real easy, it drives much nicer, the fuel economy has picked up, it's got a better throttle response, it's got a better acceleration. I mean, everything about it. It feels like a whole new car. And you can learn more about this system at the Holley Terminator EFI website. You can find that right through Holley.com.